Chris on here for Hobby Game Dev, just trying to highlight a few sort of hackery, rapid techniques for modeling in Maya. Now, I want to be clear in prefacing this, that Maya is an extremely powerful tool that professional level animators for film, and for video games of course, use to do extraordinary things. That's not my way of using it. I just jump into Maya occasionally, and this is of course the student discounted edition. I just jump in there to rapidly get a shape that I couldn't necessarily build too well out of primitives, or maybe for a figure which is more important in a prototype to reflect a particular structure or form, uh, just to communicate what it's supposed to be. And so this is basically kind of my 3D modeling equivalent to pixel art, which is to say it's much faster, much lower fidelity, but I can get it done with knowing a lot less and not being trained as sort of a full artist. Now, Maya is very, very powerful, and some of the things that can happen is you can wind up in a different mode than you mean to be. So the first thing I do to look for, make sure you're in polygons mode, not in animation, surfaces, etc. Check that you're in the polygons tab. It's where we're going to be doing most of our work, initially at least. And you want to make sure that your attribute editor is showing. And if it's not, window attribute editor will turn that on. If you're not seeing the attribute editor, you're going to get lost partway through this, just trying to follow what we're doing here. Now, the basis of what I want to try to show you to do is to place down a primitive, affect how many vertices or points the wireframe begins with, and then to manually push and pull those around in the world until basically mold it into the shape that you want. Then extract from it a texture map, paint a texture onto it, and dump that into Unity. Because at the end of the day, my only interest in this stuff is to put into Unity, not to pre-render or even to animate things. So let's look at some different shapes we could use. I mean, of course, we've got cylinder. I find spheres very hard to deform in an appropriate way. Cylinders are good for certain kinds of shapes. A cube is kind of a good general purpose form to work with. So I'm going to click on the cube, and now in Maya I can click and drag to form a base, click and drag to drag it up. And now I'm not stuck with that shape because over here in the attribute editor, instead of polyshape 1, which is going to show by default, I'm going to click on polycube 1. And here I can click and drag these sliders, even after I've made it, to get the approximate form that I'm after. Let's say I want to do a pickup truck. So, something like this. And of course I can hold Alt and click and drag with the left mouse button to pan around it, or to orbit around it. Same basic camera controls as Unity. Of course, Unity copied them from Maya, but either way, once you know one, you know them both. And now this is an important step before we start deforming the mesh by moving the vertices around. I guess it's vertices. Subdivision width, height, and depth. These are where we really care to make changes, because it's going to control how many handles we have going through it. You can see we can adjust how many we have vertically, horizontally, and long ways. And for a pickup truck, well, let's think about kind of like how many times do we need it to push, bend, change shape, and so on. And let me think. Well, for the depth, I'm going to give it 2. It's going to give us some ability to kind of bevel around the edges a bit. I'm going to show you what I mean by that in a moment. And then this is going to be kind of like a dent in for where the hood is. I can push these down. This will be a fine enough starting point. If I really wanted to go in higher fidelity, I could do many more than this, but I want to do as few as I can that's still going to work for what I'm after. Once I've got those set up, I want to leave those as they are. And now there's 2 different kind of main menus you can use Maya. One is you hold the space bar over the mesh you're looking at, and it'll show you lots of different options. A lot of those are actually the same as the menu contents up here. Or you can hold down the right mouse button to change which mode you're in. We want to change to vertex mode first. You'll see now I can click on individual points instead of selecting the object as a whole. By default, we were in object mode, which meant we either had the whole shape selected or not. With the object selected, I went to vertex mode. And now, what I want to do is I'm going to move the camera to pick their spot. I'm going to click and drag like a lasso select. So the lasso, sort of line up the points I want to select, click and drag them. And now I can use W, E, and R to select, just like in Unity, between the movement axes, the rotation axes, and scale parts. And just like in Unity, of course, I can click and drag the arrows to push and pull the shape. All these lines on to keep it in a way that's fixed. Like when I drag the green arrow, it's going to be straight up and down. Red arrow is going to be straight left and right. It's a good way for me to maintain control in what I'm doing. And, okay. Let's go and then sync the back of the pickup truck. So I selected these vertex sets back here, moving that down. And of course, part is going to make it look more like a pickup truck. I'm going to move this whole set in closer. And you can see I'm getting there. It's rough, but you can kind of see what I'm getting at. And I said I can bevel the sides. What I mean by that, for example, is I can select this whole side, and hold shift and select this whole side, again by lasso selection. And with the edges selected, I'm going to use that scale tool. I'm going to shrink it from the yellow, means on every axis, so that they will shrink in. And you can see I've got kind of a little bit more smoother sort of shape going on here. And let me see if there's anything else I want to do. So let's say I wanted to make that bevel a little like closer to the edge of the truck, because right now it's very rounded, not very truck-like. I can now just scale, again, W, E, and R, shift between the move, rotate, and scale tools. With the scale tool selected, or the R key, this one over here, I can drag the blue one to scale in just that direction, and then move my bigger forms out closer to the edges. And there we go. And now if I click up here on the solid tool, or these are sort of, these don't affect the nature of your model, just how they're being viewed here in Maya. But this will help give me a better vantage point of, okay, I see that's roughly the pickup truck shape I was going for. And let's see, we could put some tires on it and stuff, but we'll kind of like call it a day with just this bit for now. Basically, if you wanted to add tires, I would just throw in some cylinders, reduce their caps. Although I guess I'll first show you how to do that. It'll help. We're going to click and drag to make the tire. Click and drag it up. Now I can, first thing I'm going to go to poly cylinder 1, just like we went to poly cube 1 for the cube to change its dimensions. Here's where it's not too late for me to change its overall radius, or for me to change its height if I want to adjust its thickness. Of course, I can also type in a number here if I want something that's approximately that, but not quite that. I can also change the subdivision axis. So 20 is probably far more than we really need for a real-time model, especially if we're going to texture map it later. Let's just say 10 for the wheel or whatnot. Height, caps. Basically, these are how many times you can see I can subdivide the... let me hold on. Get over here. Height cap. I just put mouse over viewport and press F, just like in Unity, to focus point on it. You can see we can slice it this way if we wanted to like have a choke point around it, which maybe for a tire might make sense. We could do the same sort of bevel trick I did for the truck. And subdivision caps is how many times you want to divide up the top or the bottom. You can see there, if we want to have like a skyscraper where parts of it pull out, this might make sense. And maybe even again for a tire, we'll play with that. We'll see how this comes out. Okay, so we've got this basic shape. I'm going to go back to vertex editing mode. And let's see, I'm going to select that set, hold shift and select those. Now with them all selected, shrink it down a bit. Now we're going to get kind of more of a rounded tire, which I think is going to work for us. And next, I just want, I'm going to click anywhere to deselect. I just now want these points that are nearer to the middle. I don't want those outer points. And because I'm lasso selecting, it should be selecting all the way through the shape. See, I actually accidentally got one over here. There we go. And as a clue of whether you're getting the points that you mean to, you can look at where it's centering your control widget here. Because if we got it going right, yep, I keep getting the wrong ones. There's better ways to do this, but I'm trying to show you the quick and dirty. Alright, so now I can scale that in a little bit. And I might even push it in a bit. Oh, you can see I was missing a couple points there still. Alright, I got all those around that way, all those around that way. Missing the same two on the bottom. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to scale them all. I'm going to push them downward. There we go. More of kind of a tirey shape. And I'm going to go back into object mode. I'm going to use the rotate widget to rotate it around till it's facing outward. I'm just going to put these kind of about where they go on a truck. And of course, if I was really trying to model a truck, and it's supposed to even be vaguely realistic, it'd be smart to find a reference on the internet to look at, print out, photograph for comparison. It goes a long way. It turns out that your memory of proportions of things is kind of often pretty way off, as you might be able to tell. I'm making kind of more of a cartoony truck. Okay. I just duplicated that with Command D or Control D, of course, in Windows. Duplicate those again. Drag them over here. more powerful ways to mirror stuff, but again, kind of focus stays quick and dirty. Rotated them around 100 degrees. And I can even use these lines to help clue me in. Are these about balanced in terms of how far they stick out from the vehicle? I can help set up both sets so that only the first third of it is sort of inside the vehicle. There we go. Okay, got a truck. You can see I got tires on it. And now next up, we're gonna texture it. But first, let's go ahead and save our model. It's good habit to save our work so we don't get lost in what we're doing. We're going to File, Save Scene. Now, people often will export into various formats for use in Unity. I just like to save the Maya binary directly, partly because I'm lazy and fast enough about doing the art stuff that I'm not worried about. There's actually good reasons why you might export, but for the sake of the kind of scale space that we work, this will be okay. Let's first have a Unity project though. So I'm going to switch over to Unity because I want to save my Maya binary into the folder. You can see here I was doing a demo before the little practice run. I'm just going to say New Project. And let's call this Model Showcase. Don't need any of those packages yet. We could always go to Import Menu later to get them if we needed them. It's going to create that in Unity. All right, here we go. Now I'm going to right-click on Assets, Reveal in Finder. Actually, first, let's go ahead and save our scene as Showcase Scene. Always remember that the scene in Unity is separate from the project. The scene is like a level. The project is like all the levels content together. All right, so there's our asset. I'm going to go click on right-click, View and Reveal in Finder, or you can click on Assets, Reveal in Finder. And so in here, you'll see Users, Deleon, Model Showcase, Assets, Showcase Scene. Okay, looking good. And that's where we want to save our Maya model. Users, Deleon, Model Showcase, Assets. Users, Deleon. Okay. We go back to there. Model Showcase, Assets. There we go. I'm going to call this Truck Model. Maya Binary. Because what's nice about this, continue, is that Unity can handle that binary directly. So I'm going to hop back into Unity. And it's going to take in a moment of chugging. And then there's our truck model, which is already imported for us. I can drop that right into the world. And there's our model here in Unity. Now, first thing you're going to notice, see this crazy business right here. That was Shift Spacebar, by the way, to change between full and partial panel. Shift Spacebar. See this little triangle it cut in right here? On both sides? We don't have that in our model, so why did it show up over here? And the reason is, when we do these sort of cheap vertex grab manipulations I showed, in many ways we actually wind up, let's look closer at this part of our mesh in our model. If I look at our wireframe view, you'll see that we're stretching not triangles, but quads, 4-point polygons. And so Maya and Unity can disagree on how those should be divided into triangles, but they have to be triangles in order for the game to use it. And so we're going to add an additional step here, which is going to be under Mesh, Triangulate. And you'll see how that split every one of those quads into two different triangles. That makes more explicit in the file that gets saved Maya's answer to how these shapes should be triangulated. I'm going to do the same thing on these. Mesh, Triangulate. Just kind of get in the habit of triangulating my models. Now you might think, isn't that doubling the number of polygons you have? And no. Because again, they're getting turned into triangles either way when you're using it in Unity. So when you're explicit about it, you have the same number of triangles either way, but they're going to more closely match the shapes that you've defined. So I'm going to save it again. And what's cool about this, I can hop right back into Unity, and immediately it updates from the model. You can see already, now that's much more perfectly the shape that we had. Okay, so we got our model. And next step, by the way, let's go ahead and first of all, real quick, main camera, selected, align with view. This will move the camera to where our viewpoint is. You can see in the camera preview, or when I press play, that right now it's unlit. Let's go ahead and light it by creating a, let's see, game object, create other, directional light. Of course, directional lights are a really handy way to light a whole scene with a single light. Press play. We can see there's our model. And let's go and also create a quick script. This is going to spin it around. Create C# script, spin model. Okay, I'm going to drag that script onto my truck model. Open my script in MonoDevelop. Remember, I like to add the script to things before I set the code up. Otherwise, I start wondering why the code I wrote isn't working, and it's because I forgot to put the script on it. There we go. And of course, once again, it's good to be careful to name your script with some intention the first time you do it. Otherwise, you'll have to come back in your file and rename this to match the name if you rename your file later. We don't have any care for a start function. Here in update, we'll just apply a constant rotation to it. So transform rotate XYZ. So no X rotation, time delta time times, let's say 80.0f 00f. So remember that, so X, Y, Z rotations, Y rotation times delta time means we're going to be frame rate independent. And this should just constantly spin us on our vertical axis. Come back over here, I press play. And sure enough, okay, we got our spinning truck. Cool. But we still don't have a texture on it. Let's texture this thing, okay? I'm going to click on my truck. And up here, the texture editor, or the UV texture editor, the T thing, I like to call it the T-pane. You'll see that by default, because we created the shape as a cube, it has this like unrolled Rubik's Cube kind of layout. That's not really the shape of our truck, right? And there's a bunch of right and long form ways to map this space more like our truck. My favorite, when it works, it's amazing. When it doesn't work, it's kind of frustrating. But right here, this tool will try to look at it from each angle. And especially for these kind of rigid, non-organic shapes, like a truck, oftentimes it works pretty well. And so we wind up with this space. You can see pretty clearly here. Here's like the side, one side of the truck, the other side. This could be the top or the bottom. These are probably more parts from the overhead. And here's what I like to do next to figure out which of these map to which parts of that truck. We're going to go to Polygons, UV Snapshot. That's going to save out an image. And let's put this in our directory 2, right alongside Model Showcase, Assets. Because we're going to use this as our texture, I'm going to call this Truck Texture. Save. And now by default, it's probably going to try to export Maya IFF. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what that is. I'm going to say PNG, because I know what that is, and that's something we can texture. Or, heck, you could do JPEG or whatever if you feel like it, but PNG is what I like to use. Keep aspect ratio, anti-alias lines, yeah, it all seems good. Okay. Okay. And now it won't even give us feedback, except maybe somewhere down here. There it is. Here's the only feedback we get. Saved file to that location. Cool. All right. So let's go open up that file and see what's going on in there. And our way to do that, I'm going to hop back into Unity. Just because I know that this is there's our truck texture. See that? Right click, reveal in Finder. So there's our actual PNG file. Open it up with Photoshop. All right, it's going to be kind of hard to see. And the reason for that is because it's over transparency and all we see are the white lines. So I'm going to create a new layer with that button down here. I'm going to spray paint a solid color or paint bucket a solid color below it. Change the layer order. Now you can better see those truck lines. But see, if we did this, we just have a green truck. We wouldn't have any better idea of what's where. So my little trick here, pretty standard kind of move. I'm going to switch to my gradient tool in Photoshop. Change from one of the color-based gradients. Right now, like the first two, pay attention to what bucket color you have. This rainbow one's just kind of do a rainbow regardless. And on that color layer, I'm just going to stretch a rainbow all the way across it. Okay? Because what this is going to help me do is help me then see, okay, which side of the truck is that has a purple on it? Which side of the truck, is at the top or the bottom, it's got this big green band. That's going to help me see what I can paint that's going to go where on my truck. I'm going to merge my layers with Command E, Control E in Windows. Save my texture. You can see here it got updated in my file system. When I hop over to Unity, you can see it got updated there. But we still haven't even applied that texture in Maya. So let's go and do that first, okay? Here's our model. I'm going to switch to object mode instead of face. See, it was in face mode. Face mode is going to have us apply textures piece by piece. We don't want that yet. There's our whole model, because I held down the right mouse button, went to object mode, click the model. Now I'm going to go to Window, Rendering Editor, Hypershade. This is how you put textures on stuff. It's going to seem like kind of out. Why is it so far out of the way? What is Hypershade? Why doesn't it say Texture Menu? Sorry. Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade is how you put textures on stuff. If there's a smarter way to do it, I don't know it. All right. Now we just need to create a standard Lambert. We don't want to mess with the default Lambert. That's the one applied to everything by default. I'm going to click on Lambert over here. If you don't see it, click on Favorites up here to narrow it down. Lambert. Now we have a new one. we're kind of actually done here in Hypershade, because now we can see it over here in the attribute editor. And again, if your attribute editor isn't showing, but hopefully you found it earlier, that's Window, Attribute Editor, pulls it back up. Let's go and rename our new material to truck, I don't know, truck art, whatever. I'm just trying to use different names, different places, so you don't get mixed up as to like, does it have to match the file name and stuff? It doesn't. All right. Now over here, I'm going to actually ignore, I'm going to press enter to save that name I typed in. I'm going to ignore all this stuff except the checker box next to color, because that's going to let me say that, okay, I don't actually want to set a color. I want to set a texture or an image for the color. Creates me lots of options for render nodes. I got options like fractals and cloth and random wood generation. File is really the only answer that really applies in this case. Unity can't do all of the procedural stuff that Maya can for rendering pipelines. So I'm going to click on File. And once again, there's a bunch of options in this menu. I'm going to ignore them. All I care about is here under File Attributes, where it says Image Name. That's what I want. I'm going to click that folder here. I'm going to go back to that folder that I've saved our exported UV map and painted the rainbow under, which is under Model Showcase, Assets, Truck Texture, Open. Sweet. And we see there's our image. By the way, if you ever change your PNG, you can come in here and click Reload, and it's going to refresh the one that's in here. But we still have to put this texture now on the truck. So I'm going to click on that truck. Again, I'm in object mode, not in face mode. I'm then going to hold down the right mouse button. At the very bottom, you'll see Assign Existing Material. I'm going to choose Truck Art. There. Now you might think, well, where to go? Why can't I see it? It's on there, but you won't tell until you click the checkered soccer ball up here. That's what shows us the textures in the editor. And here we go. There we can see we've textured our truck. Now you might, okay, like, well, why can't I still see those lines on it and stuff? Like, I'm not in wireframe mode. Remember that if I go back to Photoshop, Unity, Truck Texture, Reveal in Finder, open with Photoshop. There's our texture. You've got to remember, I saved the wireframe over the image because I thought that was going to be a helpful way for us to figure out where we're painting. But, I mean, I could save this image back without it. Saved. Go back to Maya. Go back to it in the Hypershade. That's Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade, Truck Art. This will show it to me in the Attribute Editor. I can click on it over here, reload, and now you can see the wireframe isn't a necessary part of it. That's simply a side effect of the fact that initially I showed the wireframe in there because it's helpful to figure out where I'm painting. But for our purposes now, we've got our painted truck. I can save the Maya model. When I hop back into Unity, bam, there's our truck painted with our texture. I press play. We got our textured truck. Now again, it's not great, but there's enough here for us to go in back and forth and figure out, okay, like which part of this applies to that part of the truck. And fortunately, the best part is, because we can really rapidly iterate on this stuff, Reveal in Finder, open with Photoshop. Oop. Okay. Oops, I went a few steps too many. Step forward, Command, there we go. All right, so we look at our truck. We can see that like this green band is on the bottom, so that seems like the bottom of our truck. You can come over here, kind of work on this in layers, and there's ways to actually connect it straight to the Photoshop file instead of a PNG, but for our purposes, I think this will be okay. Let me make the bottom of my truck gray stuff. I'm doing this as another layer just so I don't get mixed up, but you get the idea. Okay, there's that. And in fact, let's go and do this as a PSD file instead of a PNG. Now that we're kind of back over in Unity, let's try that. Okay, I'm going to save this because I've saved the layers and haven't merged them together. It's going to want me to save this as a PSD. You know, albeit I'll say as PSD to specify that's a different file. Hop back into Unity, and if I click this thing on my truck, if I change from truck textures image here to truck texture as PNG, you'll see that Unity has no problem converting that texture to the format I want. You can see the bottom is now gray. And again, this is actually now super convenient because I can look at, okay, where's that crossbar on the blue? It's likely the windshield. I can check it. Probably this guy. Let me find out. Red there. Save. Come back in here. Nope, that's top of the truck. Okay. And of course, I could even come through here. Want to be kind of like snappy. Top. Okay. I can kind of label my sections. This is my... Let's see. Maybe the front of my car is... There. Come back over here. Yep, there we go. And so now I can see, like, there's the top. I've labeled it for myself. Here's where my drivers can be, so I could come in here and draw some stickmen, which we will do hastily, as I am wont to do. Is this the bottom of the where the driver should be? It is. Cool. Okay, in which case, let me give myself some boundary there. And part of what's nice is you can actually afford to be a little bit sloppy as long as you go, basically as long as what's where the texture's being used is the way it ought to be, you're in good shape. I'm going to switch over to one that uses the colors I've got. Do kind of a glass looking texture. Yeah, it'll do. Bidirectional. Okay. And I might even, let's make another layer here. Do kind of a shadow of a person. Make this like 10. Drivers on the, I can't remember which side. Either way, we can always just say the game's either set in England or set in the United States based on, you know, whatever side we're wrong about. And I can make that partly transparent to look like this person like behind the wheel or something. Okay, save, hop back in Maya or Unity. Okay, the person's a bit big. But, of course, again, so it's outstanding about it being a PSD. It's easy enough for me to iterate. Try another size. Save, I'll hop back into Unity. Closer to right, but now it looks kind of goofy because the top of it is still so silly. That part should probably look more metallic. Heck, let's just go ahead and say like this whole area here. Pick kind of whatever truck color we want. Kind of an orange truck maybe. And go back to my standard paint bucket. Get rid of the word top. There, you can see we're getting somewhere. And this is going to take me a little while, but it's pretty fast compared to the longer form way to properly texture and model something with some of the more advanced techniques. And of course, more importantly, we only look at a very few different ways of doing anything in Maya to get here, to get a truck shape out of it. Now, you might say, okay, well, what about back here? We want to connect this texture to the file. How do we do that? Well, we can also come down to Maya and just set up the PSD that way, which is another way. If we're going to keep going back and forth with Maya, this is a better way to do it. Once you're in Unity, oftentimes once I have my basic shapes, I don't actually wind up going back to Maya that often. But that's our super fast modeling and texturing demonstration. Uses just a few minimal tools off either one. Of course, if you're looking for free alternatives to Maya, Blender is a great tool. I'm going to try to do a video tutorial for that not too long from now. Looking for alternative to Photoshop, GIMP.org, and Unity, of course, the indie version free, which I'm using here, really gets the job done for us. So it's Chris Down for Hobby Game Dev. I hope it's been helpful to you. If you got questions, send them to my email. I'm not a modeler, I'm not an animator, I'm not a texturer. I'm just someone who, rapid gameplay designer. And so sometimes I like to try to unbottle like myself, being able to like models really quickly. That's the only kind of thing I'm trying to show here. So if you have other tips for doing it especially quickly or especially easily, let us know. Thanks so much, and I'll have more content for you soon. Bye-bye.